I start my Fire Emblem Awakening Lunatic run by creating my avatar character that best represents me. Naturally, this means I select the default female character. Ironically, the pixelation scaling settings I use for my factory 3DS has caused the 3D models to bug, leading to a more accurate representation of me, that being a broken human being. I also named the character Robin with a Y, with intent to create a joke where every time I have to reset the run, the name will be written more akin to the way that a 40-year-old soccer mom writes the name of her newborn on a birth certificate. As for the actual build, I run a plus speed, minus skill Robin because once again, it is a reflection of my gameplay abilities in Fire Emblem. We begin with a flash-forward introduction cutscene that is surprisingly well animated when considering the previous game brought in an amount of revenue so low, the game wasn't even shipped to the West. In the cutscene, we see a clearly evil wizard wearing the exact same clothes as the protagonist. The map consists of about 10 seconds of gameplay, where we walk up to Valadar and tell him we are Valadar going to shove our nuts in his mouth. Oh, who would have thought? The guy wearing the same evil clothes as the evil wizard would stab a guy. Robin is plucked from the ground by 3 important, 2 of which sacrificable, units, namely being Gulchrome, a 10-year-old that is a marriage option for some reason, and finally a Rip Dude that can kill enemies by flexing too hard. However, for some reason, he seems skeptical that we cannot recall our own name, or any other noteworthy details about ourselves. With my options extremely limited, it takes me 5 attempts to even begin a mountain attack against the bandits. I find it difficult to funnel enough XP into Robin and Chrom without dying to the jacked mage in the center of the map. After pushing through these initial soldiers, I use the respectable strategy of becoming Jesus and walking in the mode of the river. For some reason, lords and tacticians are able to walk on water, letting me safely chip away at the enemies with Robin's Thundertone. This is what I should have done. However, the mage freaked me out, so I killed it with Frederick, leading to my units getting next to 0 XP. Chrom, in a not even close encounter, manages to make it to level 3 by the end of the chapter. I attempt to feed the boss kill to Robin, but an unlucky dual strike leaves Frederick to get the kill instead. This series of unfortunate events, and blunders on my part, leaves Robin on an astounding 90 EXP for chapter 1. This chapter begins with Chrom hunting a fucking bear off camera with the legendary blade. All of a sudden, a catastrophic event occurs, and Chrom manages to 2-round an enemy risen, the most unrealistic thing in this cutscene. Ironically, time travel also occurs in this cutscene, as a giant portal that has the number 69 on it materializes out of the sky, and a strange woman, I mean man, jumps out of the portal to save Lissa with a clutch dual guard. As much as she would help to be in this stupid chapter, this mysterious lady, guy, disappears and leaves us to fend on our own. I try in vain to abuse the force on the map to thin some waves on enemies with Frederick. However, he is my only competent unit, and it leaves me with no room to train any other units. In this chapter, we're joined by Virion, a ridiculous, sexist archer who's also kind of based, and Soli, who spits on the name of all red early game cavalry units by being utterly useless. I actually get pretty close in the chapter, benefiting from a lucky dodge from Fred to avoid the hammer user, who can absolutely one-round any unit in my army. However, I am ultimately killed by the boss in a great example of complacency, as I pray that his short axe misses, but unfortunately continues to hit Frederick with 40% hits until he dies. In my frustration of having no competent units, I completely restart. Unfortunately, at this point it's been 40 minutes since my bit with Robin's name was created, so I completely forgot and gave her the exact same name, this time with a minus luck stat line instead of a minus skill. I managed to sap much more strength from the prologue this time, properly using the water walking strategy and dealing with the mage by spamming vulneraries until he dies. From there, I chip away at the rest of the enemies and end the map with a level 4 Robin, as opposed to the astounding 90 EXP I got on the first attempt. Also, in a failed attempt, my Chrom ends up in the stupidest situation possible, and an insane series of events lets him live. What the heck? What? What? Wait, I trolled! Oh, it's fine, it's fine. This makes chapter 1 much more manageable, and by reset 11, I have enough of a strategy to gain a victory. I park Robin on the fort, dodge tanking the first wave of enemies, lure enemies away from Robin by using Chrom as bait, and nearly get Virion killed by an archer. However, by strategically running them away, I'm able to live. As I have already killed the hammer guy with Robin, Frederick is free to get an epic 1v1 battle with the boss, where the enemy risen throws a short axe 25 times into Frederick's face. This breaks the weapon, allowing me to get the kill with combined effort from Robin and Chrom, for that sweet, juicy XP. Chapter 2 begins in Yellowstall, the capital of Ylisse. We meet Imran, sister of both Chrom and Lisa, who is the queen of Ylisse. Unfortunately, due to parts of the story I'm not able to clown on until a future moment, Emerin is not a marriage candidate. We meet the rest of the shepherds and add new units to our ranks. Stahl, who's garbage. Muriel, who's garbage. And Vake, who's actually probably the second or third best character for soloing the game. Unfortunately, I am loyal to my customizable avatar character, and thus will be sacrificing him the first moment is convenient. Vake forgot his axe in this chapter, making him particularly useless for the first onslaught of Rhythm. I have Crom pair up with Fred, relying on a dual strike to clear one of the early threatening enemies. Once enemies have surrounded Fred, I retreat to the southwest, and although there's no choke point to abuse, I am able to effectively limit the number of Rhythms that can attack the rest of my army down to 1 per turn. A rank, bro.
My lord. Right. Well, what? Ah.
Right. No, obviously I need to use auto battle. Ah. Okay. Once I defeat this first group of soldiers, I move up to the Northern Risen. For some ungodly reason, these soldiers have linked AI, making it incredibly difficult to clear them cleanly, especially considering the boss is absolutely jacked and can double my Robin. This part required a ton of trial and error, and save states. Yes, I cheated. I learned I was able to distract part of the forces with the water walking trick, while the rest are dealt with by Frederick. You can tell how much sanity I have lost by the sheer joy that comes across my voice once the chapter is completed. Oh my gosh. Nice level up, dude. Nice level up. Gosh.
Ah.
This mode sucks. We begin this chapter traveling to Faroe. So you walk up to the fort, we are shocked to find that despite our assumption of friendly neighbors, we instead are forced into a fight to the death at the fort to prove we are real nobility. Unfortunately, due to the lunatic difficulty scaling, it is nearly impossible to prove my nobility through normal means. Instead, I plan to use my pre-promote and occultist to wipe out all the enemies. Crom gets rained on by javelins, likely referencing Fire Emblem The Sacred Stones, where Seth stands on a fort with 5 javelins until the map is completed. Unfortunately, the Kletsumia saves Crom with her new Pegasus, somehow dodging all the 80% hits from the javelin users. At this point, my units hit like wet toilet paper, and 60% of them die in 1 round of combat. In this map, we're joined by Kellum, who is sadly forgotten by everyone he loves, just like me. Kellum is actually decently useful when compared to other units, as he managed to survive an entire round of combat against an enemy soldier, which literally no one else except for Crom and Fred can do. I first clear the left side of the enemies, and then quickly am forced to mount a defense on the right. I use Frederick as a wedge, stopping the enemies from reaching the rest of my army. Luckily, Frederick and Robin together can kill the soldiers, and I'm able to filter through the rest of the enemies with a combined effort from Frederick, Crom, and Robin. I decide to open the eastern door as there's a hammer fighter there who risks one-shotting Frederick. I use Stahl and Sully as a door key, and just like all door keys, they are consumed upon use. I managed to use them as meat shields, giving me enough time to kill the hammer fighter before it hits Frederick. I almost get Robin killed, but I use a transfer maneuver to heal her before the turn ends. Probably the coolest thing I've done in a strategy game, and it's probably just average 3DS Fire Emblem gameplay. With only the boss left, I gun him down with Robin for more EXP. After the battle, the general apologizes as she now respects our abilities as an army. Robin and Crom are shocked at her sudden change in demeanor, despite the fact that she just put a bullet in the back of the heads of 2 of their friends. This is not an example of looted narrative dissonance, as no one really cared about them anyway. Chapter 4 begins with the meeting of the Khan of Faroe. Due to some stupid politics, we are called to fight to the death so that we can actually get their help. In this fight, we meet Marth once again, and this time Crom and him, have a fight to the death. Naturally, they both start the map with full HP. Using the renowned reward second seal, I reclassed Robin into a Dark Mage with plans to Nosferatu tank for 20 chapters in a row in the near future. This has been the easiest map so far, only taking 3 attempts. Enemies approach 2 per turn until finally Marth comes, and as long as you're able to clear the 2 units in a single turn, it's not too bad. With Frederick, Crom, and Robin with a Flux Tome, I'm able to meet this quota with precise positioning. However, I accidentally put Lisa in the range of a fighter with a short axe, who she manages to survive against with a miracle proc. I managed to body block Marth into not killing her, and naturally, to end the fight, I weaken Marth with Crom and kill her with Robin to get more XP. Now that the Eastern Khan is in charge, she gives us aid to fight Plegia, and the Western Khan gives us Long Q, a Myrmidon who's repulsed by women, so he's basically the opposite of Virion. This brings up the important point as to why we would have to fight in the arena to the death if the other Khan was going to help us anyway. Paralog 1 begins with a detour of multiple hours away from the main conflict. In this chapter, Donald is a regular villager who is voluntold to fight by Crom to save his mother, or else he won't do it. The initial area is treacherous, and it takes multiple attempts to finally be able to get a working strategy. I use long Q for a scuffed dodge tanking strategy as I clear the northern enemies, and then move to clear all the enemies off of long Q. Unfortunately, I missed Killer Lance due to the fact that I'm too slow in the opening area. A unit in a random room has a hammer, stopping me from using Fred to lure out their linked AI. So instead, I use Donald as bait to lure the fighters out of the room where I can clear them more clearly. After this point, I pick up the treasure and slowly clear out the rest of the rooms by baiting enemies with Fred. Donald apologizes for the fact that he wasn't very useful. However, I personally wish there were more of them so that I could use them as a disposable shield, similarly to how the President uses Secret Service agents. Unfortunately, the game doesn't officially kill off Donald, as that would raise the ESRB rating of the game, so instead he goes to live the rest of his life on a farm, suffering from the after effects of a grade 3 concussion from a 25 damage hammer to the face. Chapter 5 begins with Imran heading to the western border in an attempt to save Maribel from the evil Mad King Gangrel. However, Gangrel uses this opportunity to bait Crom into killing one of his soldiers, and considers it a declaration of war. This is similar to how the United States allegedly intentionally sunk the USS Maine in Havana Harbor as part of justification for war, leading to the deaths of 260 crew members and the beginning of the Spanish-American War. Gangrel manages to use this tried and true tactic, beginning the battle with a significant upper hand of about 3 times as many soldiers as Crom's army. The map starts with Maribel, a troubadour which is good for healing, and Rickon, a decent mage against wyverns, away from the rest of the army. I struggle for multiple attempts to get them out of the corner before they die, before I realize I have a rescue staff. I do have a rescue staff, what the heck? This allows me to safely transport them to my army. At this point, Robin has become quite formidable, and with a pair up from Kellum, can solo hold the northern choke with a couple lucky 40% dodges. I use the rest of my units to clear the western front and put a unit on the fort to stop reinforcements. Unfortunately, a reinforcement Wyvern Rider one-rounds Virion, who, honestly, I couldn't care less about. It took me multiple attempts to work out a strategy of kiting away the linked AI Wyvern Riders, but I realized on one attempt that Corin can completely solo anything, so I just put her in range and she one-rounds everything. I also put Crom on the fort to get as much extra XP as he can, and I nearly get him killed, but luckily he's bailed out by a dodge. From here I soak up the last bits of XP that I can. At this point my Robin is so powerful that I'm fairly confident that the rest of the game will go smoothly. Imran and friends are forced to prepare for war, and Crom blames himself for the conflict, despite the fact that the enemy blew up their own ship. Chapter 6 begins with Marth thwarting an assassination attempt by the same weird cultist we fought at the beginning of the game. Uh-oh, turns out Marth's a girl. Who would have thought? The map begins as a sort of defense chapter, and our units are separated by a really annoying room and a few very angry enemy fighters. Unfortunately, Fred is no longer able to tank like he used to, and I find it very difficult to use one single unit to clear out the whole map. However, careful player phasing allows me to mostly only take the brunt force of the attack with Robin, Marth, and occasionally Frederick. Marth retreats because she can't fall here. In this map we are joined by Pan, a Tagwell, an endangered race of furries that can turn into rats. She's the last of her kind, meaning that it is likely Tagwells will be extinct within the next couple of chapters. We are also able to recruit some thief that I forgot the name of and don't really care about. Once we cleared the chapter, Marth walks away, and Crom thanks her for saving Imran, although she was only in the map for a solid 3 turns before she died. Paralog 2 is basically the same exact plot as Paralog 1, except this time we actually have to save a village before it gets destroyed. Anna, the main merchant in the Fire Emblem series, is also next to this village, although it is basically impossible for her not to die on her own within a couple of turns. My personal theory of Anna is that her insatiable capitalistic greed causes her to break the laws of the universe itself, allowing her to reproduce through expensive cloning vats, and has enough money to phase into different realities. In this video essay, I will be explaining why Anna is the representation of Western capitalistic culture, and how enough money can give people the power to do whatever they want. The map itself consists of a couple turns of Sumia flying Robin to the village for the physics staff, and the rest of my units hiding in the corner until the map's completed. Chapter 7 begins with a random green guy who isn't evil looking at all, leading the group into a suspicious canyon. Almost immediately we are ambushed and the green guy gets killed by a random unit due to his unreliability and insubordination. I first attempt this map thinking that I can just solo the whole thing with Robin, so I barely moved my other units as I killed entire waves of enemies on enemy phase. Unfortunately, this game's sick, twisted idea of difficulty is ambush spawns. On a completely unrelated note, 3 Wyvern Riders spawn in the starting area and annihilate my entire army. I wouldn't really be upset about this, but I kinda need my healers. Tilted from these stupid deaths that I could not have prepared for, I underdeploy my entire army, only keeping Robin and Crom. Cordelia arrives, warning us of the fight that is currently ongoing. The chapter takes an entire 3 turns as I slowly walk toward the boss and kill all the enemies on enemy phase. Cordelia laments that her entire squad was slaughtered in front of her by an ambush, leaving her mortified and without home. Naturally, Pala puts her with us, presumably because we won't be killing any units in the near future. This chapter begins with us completely leaving Imran behind in Yellowstall, only for her to get captured within minutes. We march toward Gangrel, only to be in some stupid desert when we're attacked. In this chapter, we're joined by Naui, a mannequin who appears to be a child, and Gregor, a guy who's attempting to help the child and to protect the child from danger. At this point, Robin is promoted and has become so strong that I'm fairly confident that the only units I will need are her, Chrom, and a couple of healers, and flyers to keep the healers safe. This means that I'm safe to use my desired strategy of war, that being human wave tactics. On enemy phase, Rickon is obliterated by a fighter, some guy dies, Muriel plans to attend Lucifer's University to continue her studies, and Gaius Loft picks a door, only to realize it was the one to Purgatory, which is a bad thing, because I kinda need a thief. Pan's race goes extinct because I stole all their items so that I could sell them for a little bit of gold. And finally, now he is instantly obliterated by a dark mage. Robin remarks of how we could use her help and that she could handle herself, despite the fact that her entire head was severed from her body by a Nosferatu crit. I use Sumia and Cordelia to get to the village, and have Lisa heal Robin a single unnecessary time before she obliterates the rest of the map. We end the map by talking to the severed head of Naui, who's actually 1,000 plus years old, and yeah, she's a marriage candidate. Frederick comments on how Manicued are more resilient than men, as what is left of the shepherds stand over a dead body. Chapter 9 is titled Imran, which isn't ominous at all, and I'm sure nothing bad will happen. We go to save Imran, who's about to get executed, but we have hatched a plan to stop it. This being that we just kill the guy who's going to execute her, and then we're free to do whatever we want on the map until we kill all the enemies. This gives me plenty of time to fulfill my death quota. As promised in Chapter 2, Fake succumbs to a severe case of axe poisoning, Gregor gets skewered like a shish kebab, and Long Q dies despite never feeling the touch of a woman. I attempt to recruit Libra, and figure he can survive an enemy phase on his own. Since as a green unit he did just fine. Unfortunately, I was incorrect, and Libra is instantly killed by a wyvern. I also killed Tharja since I wanted her elf undertone, and didn't really care about keeping her alive anyway. After the map, our plan to save Emerald with Pegasus Knights is foiled when 7 Archer Risens show up out of nowhere and annihilate Pala and her squad. We are given the choice to sacrifice Emerald or not. Naturally, I picked to sacrifice her to maximize the amount of death, but unfortunately, Chrom is too caught up in his own ballsack to make the correct decision. Luckily, Imran decides to splat against the ground anyway, so that Chrom doesn't have to make the wrong choice, and also so that there's not a meaningful decision for the player to make. Chapter 10 is unironically one of my favorite chapters in a Fire Emblem game. I particularly love the track Don't Speak Her Name, which is played continuously throughout the map. The Pelagian soldiers are moved by Imran's death and don't see a reason to fight. Unfortunately, the commander cannot back down as he's worried Gangrel will kill his family. In a very heartwarming moment, the soldiers pledge to fight not for their cause, but rather for their commander. This map is the pinnacle of Fire Emblem story in my opinion. However, unfortunately, at this point I have a Jack-Up Robin that completely ruins the gameplay story integration of the map. After I get Frederick killed on turn 1, I proceed to mow down the entire map for optimal XP gain. The commander has a literal 0% chance to hurt Robin, so I one-round him and he begs that I don't hurt the rest of his army. I do follow his wishes in a roundabout way, as he no longer has an army, as it has all been pulverized into a couple of level ups. Chapter 11 is the final chapter in the Lysae vs Plegia arc of Fire Emblem Awakening. At this point, Gangrel's soldiers are no longer willing to fight, so he makes his final stand against 2 soldiers, Chrom and Robin, alone on the battlefield. Unfortunately, however, Olivia the dancer shows up, and as much as I would like to have a dancer, it is a pain in the butt to keep her alive, so she'll be dancing for God instead. The map is really short, as will the next couple chapters be, due to the fact that soloing with Robin makes the game ridiculously easy. Chapter 12 occurs 2 years later, when Robin and Chrom are married and have a child that they name Lucina. This, of course, has no actual plot relevance and is simply exposition. Flavia and Basilo warn us of the invading nation of Valm, which is a stupid arc in the story that I wish didn't exist because it's not really relevant to the rest of the plot. I mean, it's not a bad part of the game or anything, I just think that it doesn't really actually do anything for the main part of the story, but rather simply acts as filler chapters so that the game is longer. Anyway, Valm is invading the mainland and we are forced to retaliate against Walhart the Conqueror, who is actually a descendant of Alm and Celica from F.E. Gaiden. This brings up an important question of, dude, are your parents not like super disappointed in you? Unfortunately, Church joins us this chapter, and although she has flying utility, she, similarly to Olivia, cannot be saved so easily, so I let her join the Church in Heaven instead. Oh yeah, and the chapter's easy. We ask Plegia for help in the war, and they comply in a definitely not suspicious way. On a completely separate note, there are now 2 of Robin, which ironically is very telling of the next part of the game. Oh, also that evil cult guy is the leader of Plegia now, so I'm sure nothing bad is happening here. Yeah, and he's also in our heads all the time, what a weirdo. Chapter 13 is like all the other chapters. We get attacked by Risen that definitely weren't sent by the evil cult dude, and then we kill off the character that we get that chapter. I would make a joke, but Henry is literally just a worse version of our Robin at this point. At the end of the chapter, Chrom nearly gets assassinated by a 3-damage attack from an assassin. Luckily, Marth screams out father and saves Chrom. Then she tells us that she's actually a time traveler, and is actually Robin and Chrom's daughter, which we know from the crest in her eye, so her name's actually Lucina, the girl from the beginning of chapter 12. I make the story sound really stupid, but I actually don't hate it. But it is easy to make fun of when I refuse to put things into context. Now that we know about the child units, I can go save Robin and Chrom's other child, Morgan. The joke I made at the end of chapter 12 is now fulfilled, although, please, it was actually really hard to save Morgan, so I used Cordelia to fly over Robin, save her child, and then proceed to let Cordelia get brain blasted by enemies 20 levels higher than her. But back to what I was saying, we can finally complete the joke I made at the end of Chapter 12, as a clone of Robin and Crom are now also going to be joining us for the foreseeable future. I say I can seal Morgan into another Dark Mage and level him up using old paralogs. And before you ask, yes, Anna dies before I can save her. These paralogs are stupid in Lunatic difficulty. Like, seriously, did anyone test this? Did we just decide that it's required to use rescue for any units that we want to recruit? I need a thief. This was my backup plan. In Chapter 14, we're on a ship, and Robin talks philosophy about the invisible ties that bind us together. This is certainly because she is worried she will turn evil, which she definitely won't, because it wasn't foreshadowed at the beginning of the game. Also, some Vulm ships show up, and we decide to set our own ships on fire. This is partially strategical, as it allows us to catch the enemy ships on fire and stop them from attacking us, but I actually think Robin's intention was to give a giant middle finger to Valadar, because he was the one who gave us those ships. The actual map is used to power level Morgan. He can now hold his own, and Lucina is steadily getting levels as well. This will allow me to complete maps marginally faster, but will probably end up being more trouble than it's worth. In Chapter 15, we land on Valmy's soil, ready to fight against the Empire. There's some random girl that's getting destroyed in the corner by two generals. For some reason, in the chapter where a girl with no weapons is in the corner against two buff dudes, she manages to live. I decide to keep her alive because I find it incredible that she managed to survive after the past deaths of Olivia, Henry, Morgan, and Anna on their joining chapters. We decide to go find Tiki because she's the messenger for Naga or something, since this was the only way they could figure out how to keep the Vol mark relevant to their main story. I'm going to speedrun through the rest of the Vol mark real quick so we can get this out of the way faster. In Chapter 16, we managed to go to the tree where Tiki is imprisoned. It's guarded by a single man with an admittedly really nice looking mustache. That is literally his whole personality. Tiki tells us about the Fire Emblem, which is able to perform the awakening ritual once we get all the Fire Emblem sacred stones, of which we have collected 2 of, with one being held by Walhart, another by Basilo, and for some reason he won't tell us, and you'll never guess who has the last one. In Chapter 17, we fight a battle at Fort Steiger, which is by definition a filler chapter. Some evil dude shows up in the middle of the battle to turn all our reinforcement soldiers to their side, who is so ugly his mere presence in the story makes me uncomfortable. Basilo, in an attempt to stall Walhart's army attacks, enters into an unfavorable battle forecast and is left on 1 HP. Flavia attempts to save him, but somehow Walhart gets a 0% crit. What the f? Basilo's dying wish is for Flavia to give Crom the stone that he acted like he didn't have for some reason. In Chapter 18, we fight Yenfei's forces, who's Cyrie's brother, who turned against her and the entire resistance. This map was a wake-up call to me, as I actually lost twice because I was still relying on dodge tanking. Hilariously, dodge tanking was simply a way for me to save money, so I buy 7 Nosferatu tomes and proceed to wipe the whole map with these. I put Cyrie into an epic 1v1 with her brother, who's instantly annihilated by, wait a second, that's the Thunder brand! Anyway, Cyrie dies. We ended the chapter by learning that Yenfei was actually doing this to protect his sister. Cyrie's surprisingly lively corpse is shocked by this information and is very distraught, despite the fact that he totally just murdered her with no remorse. Chapter 19 begins with us meeting Walhart in the courtyard, the penultimate chapter of the Volmark. The map takes 4 turns. Walhart retreats, and it turns out he knew that Excellus, the ugly guy, was conspiring with Plegia in an attempt to obtain the Fire Emblem. Unfortunately, Excellus has gotten so diffed by Robin the past couple chapters, he puts her on the front lines. She dies, and so does Mustache Guy, and so does Walhart. We get the second to last Sacred Stone, and once we get home, Valadar wants to give us the last one, and is definitely not planning anything nefarious, and will definitely not be awakening an evil dragon. If you were wondering, chapters 16 through 20 took less than an hour, as opposed to chapter 2, which gameplay alone took me an hour. This mode is balanced. Chapter 21 starts with us looking at a giant skull of an evil dragon. Lucina has a flash-forward cutscene where she points her sword at Grima, the fell dragon, in a posture reminiscent of how the second man versus the gorilla would hold a sword after seeing the first get its head ripped from his body, similar to Naui in Chapter 8. Turns out the cult guy is actually evil, which is surprising, because we only saw a flash-forward of us fighting, and we saw an attempt of him to kill Imran, and we saw him have an evil clone of Robin, and, I mean, just look at him! He wants the Fire Emblem, so he sends soldiers to get us. In a normal playthrough, I love this chapter, as siege tome reinforcements spawn gradually up the map, pushing your army forward in unknown territory. Unfortunately, my army can be put in the middle of 20 enemies, so it's not actually a problem to push forward slightly faster. In Chapter 22, we learn that Robin is actually Valadar's daughter and has been magically brainwashed into his command. Luckily, the invisible ties that bind us together are strong enough for Robin to prevail against Valadar's mind control. Lucina tries to kill her father by killing her mother. The game asks me whether I want to accept Lucina's judgment, so I select yes to cause maximum bloodshed. But as expected, the choice doesn't actually matter, and Robin guilt trips Lucina into not killing her, as if she could. All the people near the dragon's table are being possessed and are going to be sacrificed so that Grima can awaken. In this map, we fight against 12 Deadlords. Unfortunately, they are quite formidable, so I kill 3 of them and then end the map by killing the first one, because for some reason, this chapter was defeat boss. Robin starts this chapter by telling us the invisible ties that... I'm not doing this again. We play the battle that we started at the very beginning of the game, which both times it has lied about being our final battle. Unfortunately, because I was dumb and skipped through battle prep, I accidentally deployed my filler units. This was fine because I was going to kill them anyway, but I think it's funnier if I act like I didn't for the narrative. Sumi gets obliterated by a 91 damage attack from an assassin. Maribel is killed by a 108 damage crit, which makes me regret even saving her in the first place. And finally, Aunt Lisa becomes Aunt May. Get it? Because she dies. For some reason, the first phase of Valadar doesn't get any lunatic bonuses, so I one-shot him. No way! Robin stabs Crom! Turns out it was all a fake out, and we actually played an epic prank on Valadar, who throws a hissy fit because things didn't go how he wanted them to. Basilio turns out to have played dead when he fought Walhart. He and Flavia join us. Flavia and Basilio are instantly killed, and this time I hope they stay dead. I kill a much more jacked Valadar for part 2 of the map, only to realize that for some reason it is a route map. It's fine, I'm just sick of spamming intern. In chapter 4 we awaken Naga so that we can fight Grima effectively. The map is just intern simulator, but my friend and I found the cutscene at the end very funny.
Well, I mean, I could give you the powers of making.
Okay, okay. We get the Exalted Falchion. In chapter 25, I forged a maxed out waste tome and call it Penis. I'm also so annoyed at the amount of Nosferatu tomes that I've bought that I buy 17 of them, and I swear if this isn't enough, I'm gonna crash the fuck out. Oh yeah, in the map, we kill Aversa again. In the endgame of Fire Emblem Awakening, Naga teleports us onto the back of Grima, assuming that he's unable to flip over and instantly end the hopes and dreams of all of humanity. In the chapter, we are given the option to submit to Grima, which I obviously hit yes for. But of course it does nothing. All my units shout out to me to come back and fight, which is really funny, because literally only 2 people have anything to say, because the rest are dead. Unfortunately, on the first attempt, Morgan dies and I'm forced to reset. I knew I could continue, and would have been able to kill off all my characters, but I have a better idea. With my Robin with every stat except for resistance capped, I'm able to beat Grima in a couple rounds of combat, with Penis. In the final part of the game, we are given the only choice that actually has an effect on the story. We can choose whether Crom delivers the final blow, leading to Grima's return, or Robin can deliver the final blow, causing her to disappear but annihilating the evil of the world. I really struggled with this decision, but decide that the pain of today is also the pain of tomorrow. I sacrifice Robin. This means that only 3 characters are left alive, and I've managed to make Crom a widow. The other 2 characters have a fate worse than death, that being childhood without a mother figure. This concludes my Fire Emblem Awakening Lunatic run. I have very mixed feelings on this game overall. As much as I clown on the story, I actually enjoy it quite a bit. I'm so happy that the game sold as well as it did, or Fire Emblem may not have ever had another entry in its series. As with the gameplay, I had a ton of fun for the first 5 or so chapters. I have never played a difficulty this hard, and was really enjoying the puzzle aspect of the early maps. However, once Robin gets a couple levels, the game becomes incredibly easy until the end. As far as I'm aware, this game is the most unbalanced Fire Emblem experience of all time, maybe barring FE8, but honestly, that's okay. Apart from that, this is the first video I've ever made in this style of Fire Emblem content, and I don't plan on stopping. So if you enjoy the video, be sure to like and subscribe so you can catch the next game I play. I also will be considering streaming the next series that I do, so let me know if that's something people are interested in. Thank you, and I'll see you in the next video.